you so much. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I can see how important this is for you all, and I know that you are excited and anxious to be here. I wanted to tell you a story, something that happened last night, as a matter of fact, before I get into all of the nitty-gritty regarding the safety course. But I was on the phone last night with my mother, and my mother is deaf, and so she uses a video phone. And she and I were chatting on the video phone, and I was absolutely appalled that she proceeded to tell me that an officer, a police officer, had pulled her over last night and did not make any attempt to communicate with her. He refused to call for a sign language interpreter. He refused to write notes back and forth using pen and paper. And I just couldn't believe the story that she was telling me. And so what happened was she was driving on the same street that she always drives on near her home. And she was going probably about 29 miles per hour. And the speed limit on her street is 25 miles per hour. She was with my grandmother, who is 92 years old, and my grandfather, who is 96 years old. My mother said that she was coming down the street and she saw off to the side of the road a motorcycle cop. She didn't think anything of it because, again, she didn't speed. She wasn't speeding. So the police officer pulls into the flow of traffic, and then he proceeds to pull up right behind her. He then passes her on the left-hand side of the vehicle and motions to her to pull over. So my mother just nodded her head and pulled over to the side of the road. As she rolled down the window, the police officer approached the vehicle and just started talking. Now remember, I mentioned that my mother is deaf, which means that she cannot hear. And she gestured to the police officer by pointing to her ear and shaking her head, meaning that she cannot hear. My mother turned to my grandmother's husband and started signing to him. And when the police officer realized that she was deaf, he tapped my mother on the shoulder and said to her, "Can you read my lips?" And she shook her head again and pointed to her ear to imply and motion to him that she cannot hear. The officer continued to talk to her. He did not even attempt to write notes. He didn't make any attempt to communicate with her. He just kept on speaking. He asked my mother for her driver's license and registration, but he had to gesture and ask her for it at least 4 times. My mother didn't even know why she had been pulled over. And it was very frustrating for my mother. She said they just went back and forth, and again, that communication was not effective. She was getting information that was very unclear. Well, in Nevada, they have a law that says that they must provide interpreters to people who need them. So We couldn't understand why the police officer would not call for a sign language interpreter for my mother. They do the same for Spanish-speaking individuals. They will call out Spanish-speaking interpreters. Anyway, the police officer told my mom, "Sign the ticket and we'll see you in court." And again, my mother didn't have the slightest clue as to why she had been pulled over or why she was getting the ticket. So in the signature line on the bottom of the paper, my mother had written, in quotes, "I do not understand. I need an interpreter." And then she handed it back to the officer. He didn't even look at it. He just tore the paper from his tablet and handed her a paper copy. And he said, "I will see you in court." She felt absolutely horrible and did not know what to do about what was going on. We're anxious to see what happens because her court date is coming up soon. And I know for a fact that interpreters are required it's required for interpreters to be present when a person who is deaf appears in court. And I'm curious to see what happens not only in Nevada, but in other states too. Also, one thing I didn't mention was that my mother was fined for $300, and we still don't know why she had gotten the ticket. I guess we'll find out on our court date